tell you a story this morning. If you would just bear with me, it's a story that most likely you have heard or heard at least bits and pieces of it, but I want to invite you this morning to hear it maybe through a different set of ears, to see it through a different lens. It's a story full of jealousy and backstabbing. It's got war, it's got power struggles, it's got sex, it's got all of the things that you need for the greatest stories that we hear and the greatest stories that we're told. It's a story that is all around us, unfolding all around us, and yet remains mostly unseen. I'm just hoping this morning that I can do this story a little bit of justice. It starts out like this. In the beginning was God. Now, what was before God? There was no before God. Who or what created God? Sometimes we ask. No one and nothing created God. He always was, He always is, and He always will be. And while that is difficult sometimes to comprehend, we struggle to understand and explain. Just because something is difficult to understand does not mean that it is untrue. But that's not the point of this morning's story. I digress, and so if you would, just let me restart, let me go back to the beginning again, and let's try this another time. In the beginning was God, and then He spoke. And when He spoke, the heavens came into existence. And then as He spoke again, the earth was formed. And on the earth there were put plants and animals, land, sea, water, sky. All of it was inhabited by humanity. But I've actually sped up too much again. Maybe this morning I should just stick to my notes and stop trying to just go off of my memory here. Because I need to go back and, remember the old Blockbuster tapes where they say, be kind, please rewind? If you're my age, you remember that. If you're 10 years younger than me, you have no idea what I'm talking about, and that's perfectly fine. But we're gonna rewind this one more time. We're gonna go back to the beginning. In the beginning, nothing. Nothing except the Creator. By Himself, three, yet one. And into the nothing, the Creator spoke, and the heavens came into existence. And then as the Word came forth again, the earth was formed. But not the earth that we think about today, not the earth of land and sea and sky and animals and plants, but an earth that was formless and it was empty until, as the Spirit of the Creator hovered over the formless and empty earth, the Father and the Son began to speak into existence formation on the earth. Day 1, light. Day 2, sky. Day 3, land, sea, and plants. Day 4, sun, moon, and stars. Day 5, sea animals, air animals. And day 6, land animals. And at that point, the Creator looked around the heavens and said, "This is good." But there was something that was missing. There was one more thing that this earth needed on it. And so the Creator once again looked around the heavens and said, "Let us make man in our image." And the heads nodded and the agreements came, and I just realized as I said that part that once again I have skipped over an incredibly important part of the story, but instead of going all the way back to the very beginning of it, if you would let me, I'm gonna fill in a blank here. Because as the Creator was in nothing, and as the Creator spoke the heavens into existence, He did something else that I didn't mention. He created a council in the heavens. A divine council, a council of the gods. And as the gods were with Him, as He created the earth and formed all life on it, they looked at one another and they said, "Absolutely, this is good. This is so good." They celebrated about the creation that was formed. They danced, they dined, they worshiped the Creator. He truly was everything that He said He was, and He truly was every bit as powerful as He said that He is. But in a tale that is old as the beginning of time, literally, jealousy and envy began to cause cracks in the council. See, this divine council that was with him through it all, some of these divine council members began to wonder, why was nobody singing their praises? Why was nobody worshiping them? Weren't they with the Creator when He created these image bearers on the earth? Weren't they with the Creator when He put the plants into place? Weren't they just as wise and good and beautiful as He? Perhaps in their minds even a little bit more so. And why was it that He cared so much about these image bearers that were walking around on the earth? Why were they taking so much of His attention away from them? And so day in and day out, the council members would go about their duties as a good, wise council will do. But at night, behind closed doors and in hidden heavenly alleyways, seeds of discontent were sown amongst them. They began to speak about a different way of doing things and a different amount of attention coming their way. And some would respond, no, we cannot talk like this. This is treason. We can't do this. This is treason against the Most High. But the dissidents were not swayed. They moved forward with their discontent and put plans into place as to how they would fight back. Now, the Creator saw all of this. None of this escaped His view. And He knew that He could step in and He could interfere with their plans. He could put a stop to them right where they were. But at the beginning of all time, when the creation was first put into place, when the divine council was formed, He had made the decision right then that He would give them choice. That they would have the ability to choose whether or not to love Him or whether or not to stray from Him. And though it grieved His heart because He could see what would happen at the end of the path if they chose to go the direction that they were going, He could see how it would destroy not only the heavenly council, but the earthly council that He had put into place. He stayed out of it, and He allowed them to move forward with their plans. And so, overcome with jealousy, the plan to defile the Creator's treasured crown was enacted. Their leader was every bit as good as he claimed to be. He was a master manipulator, and he skillfully countered the truth to earn one of his many nicknames that would follow, to become the father of lies. The act was more than just an act of mutiny. It was more than just an act of treason. It was a declaration of war. The Creator's heart, as you can imagine, was ravaged. Two councils of the Most High, created in His image, loved beyond measure, promised to be cared for, to be provided for, to be given hope and peace and joy through all of eternity. In one fell swoop, the envy in the hearts of one council led to the destruction of two. But for the new rebel leader, it wasn't enough to win just this one little battle. See, he wanted it all. He wanted the heavens and the earth just to himself. That day in the garden was beautiful. But he wanted so much more than to get the image bearers to just eat of a little piece of fruit and turn their backs temporarily on their Creator and to be banished from His presence in the garden. He wanted everything for himself. It was time for all hell to break loose on the earth that the Creator had created. And so instead of love and justice and mercy, He would steer the image bearers toward discontent and jealousy and hatred and murder. The leader, the rebel leader in his rebellion enjoyed many, many small victories in those early years, but they constantly hungered for more. They wanted to inflict more pain. They needed to make the image bearers not just against the Creator, they needed to make the image bearers theirs. They needed to claim them for themselves. And so as they discussed, they realized what better way to make us one with the image bearers than to intermix our blood. And so, as the Creator continued to assign his heavenly council members to watch over the image bearers that he had put on the earth, as he had put these watchers in place to care for and protect them as they walked around in their daily lives, the very protectors that the Creator had put into place committed a second act of treason. Because you see, when you're a god, you take what you like. And as these rebel gods, as these watchers looked out amongst the image bearers, they liked what they saw when they saw these female image bearers walking around them. And so they took what they liked. But in their benevolence, they gave to the world out of what they took. They gave to the world their offspring. And what a gift these offspring were to the world. Their vociferous appetites for violence were matched only by the size of their bodies. They devoured everything in sight. They were brilliant at creating weapons of war that would fuel their lust for violence. And speaking of lust, they were incredible at coming up with new ideas and new purposes for this sexual pleasure, this sexual recreation event called sex. And they were brilliant at figuring out ways to have sex lead to war amongst the image bearers. But the Creator, as always, was not blind to the chaos and the havoc that was being wreaked upon his earth. He was not uncaring. He was not distant, but he was patient. And he was forgiving. And he was loving. And he was full of compassion. And he was slow to become angry. But the day finally came, as these offspring invaded the land that he had once declared to be very good. The day finally came when the Creator said, "That's enough. We will not have this on my earth." And so, pained as it made his heart, he first took some of his very own creation, the very protectors that he had put into place over the image bearers on earth, the ones who had intermarried and intermingled and defiled the creation that he had made, and he banished them to an eternity in chains. There was no joy in it, but they had abandoned their post, and they had abused their position for long enough. The earth would no longer be theirs to roam. But what of these sons of God, these offspring of these turncoat heavenly hosts? They couldn't be left to continue to wreak havoc on what he had once declared with the agreement of his council to be very good. And so, in his most declarative response since the banishment from the garden, in a dramatic display of his power, he hit the reset button. Using the waters that he controlled, he proved once again to the heavenly realm that he was and is the most powerful, that he was and is still in charge, and that there were limits to how far he would let them go. And he proved with those waters that there was nothing that they could do about it when he says the words, "It is finished." Now, if only I could tell you right now that this was the end of the story. Like, if I could wrap it up like Disney and so many fairy tales love to do it when they just say, and they lived happily ever after and they all skipped off into the sunset. I wish that I could tell you that today. I wish that I could say that this was the end, but on the wall in the battle room in the heavens, a warning light of impending danger began to blink. As we know, jealousy and envy and hatred and bitterness, they cling to the soul like soap scum clings to a shower curtain. While the earthly threat was eliminated, and a faithful remnant of image bearers was left on the earth, and that was all, I remind you this morning that this isn't a story about earth. It's on earth, but it's not a story about earth, but rather this is a story about the things that happen around us that remain unseen. And so, although bruised and bloodied, the remaining rebellion regrouped. Looking at one another, they began to formulate a new plan until one of them finally spoke up and said, what if, just hang with me for 1 second. What if, instead of our tactic from the past of trying to convince the image bearers to merely listen to our direction and to follow us, what if we convinced the image bearers that they could be us? That they could be like us, that they could be on our level. Others responded, it'll never work. The image bearers know that this is not possible. They saw the offspring and they saw the limits of the offspring, and those demigods were half us. There is no way that the image bearers will go for this. But they argued back, no. I don't think you understand the malleability of the image bearers' minds. I think that we can convince them that they can actually get onto our playing field, that they can come and they can live among us. And so the plan was eventually put together and put in place, and the idea of a magnificent structure was put into the minds of the image bearers, a structure that would reach to the heavens, a structure that would put the image bearers on level with the gods. And it worked. Well, not the way that the image bearers thought that it would work. Not the way that the rebel gods had told the image bearers that it would work, but it worked even better than the rebel gods imagined that it could work, because the Creator responded with a resounding no. This is not the way that creation is supposed to go. This is not how this is going to happen. And so he banished to the ends of the earth the image bearers. And to the ends of the earth and the lands that they had been banished to out of his presence, he gave dominion to the rebel gods. To Assyria, he gave a god. To Babylon, he gave a god. To Egypt, he gave a god. The rebel gods were ecstatic. They finally had dominion. They finally had power over the image bearers. Each of them had their own image-bearing group to themselves, a group that would finally give them the honor that they deserved, a group that would give them worship, and a group that would sacrifice in their names. Now, sure, the rebel gods, full of jealousy and envy and hatred as their nature was, would quibble with one another, and every now and then they would influence their image bearers to actually go to war with one another like pawns in some big game. But jealousy and hatred of the Creator had blinded them so much that as long as they were all turned against Him, as long as they could unite in their war against the Creator, then they could work the rest of it out as to who would be in charge and who would be the greatest. The evidence was obvious. Different groups and countries would excel in different areas depending on the God that had been given dominion over their land. To this group over here, the economy would be incredible. To this group over here, fertility was off the charts. To this group over here, pleasures of all kind were in abundance. And to this group over here, war was the name of the game, and nobody could beat them. The rebel gods went by many names. Maybe you've heard of them as Ashtoreth or Baal or Dagon or Moloch, but whatever it is, they flexed their might, they displayed their power, and they drank in the worship of the image bearers. And they proved that they were so much more than just myths and legends. But once again, in the midst of it all, as they were establishing their power and putting their people groups, their image-bearing groups together, the Creator once again proved His sovereignty over all, proved His power over all of the rebel gods. When out of the midst of one of the groups, He said, "This group of image-bearers is mine. I'm taking them back. And there is nothing that you can do to stop me." And so He plucked a chosen group of image bearers out, and He led them to a different land, and He began to give them the commands that would walk them back into the life that they were created to live. They were to worship none of the other gods. They were not to mingle with those who did. They were not to continue in the practice of mixing bloodlines, but instead they were to be committed fully to the Creator and the Creator only. He put a hedge of protection around them, a wall around their city gates. He said, "You are mine. I love you. You are my beloved. And if you will listen to my commands and you will follow my direction, you will step back into the plan that was put before you at the beginning of all time, a plan that will have an eternity of hope and peace and love and joy and provision like you could never imagine." But as we can imagine, the rebel gods were enraged. How dare the Creator take back what they had stolen from Him? How dare He come and reclaim His creation? They would have all of it. Sure, they had most of it, but they would have all of the image bearers. They would have all of the heavens and the earth, or they would die trying to take it. And so they went to work once again, looking for the weaknesses of the image bearers that the Creator had called to be His chosen ones. Over time, it became apparent that these image bearers had a proclivity to cave under certain circumstances. If they could remove just a little bit of their creature comforts, if they could remove just a little bit of their sense of physical safety, if they could tempt them with pleasures of all kinds, especially of a sexual nature, if they could just get a little bit in here, then they could draw them away. And they almost had them in a desert. Faced with lack of food and water, the image bearers began to clamor for the gods of a land that they had once known, the gods that had given them the things that they so desperately needed right now. But God, the Creator, countered with a man, a stick, a rock, and food from heaven. But the rebel gods nearly took them again when the image bearers, several times when they would fake retreat just long enough for the people to begin to feel comfortable. And then they would strike in with an attack, removing once again the creature comforts and coming at their physical safety. But God, over and over, would counter by supplying a leader who would push back the rebel armies. But in time, with persistence, the rebel gods finally found their foothold. They finally found their way in when they broke through just enough to convince the chosen image bearers to request a leader that looked like them. A leader that they could see, that they could feel, that they could hear, that they could smell. They requested a king and rejected the Creator. And to the amazement of the rebel gods, the Creator relented. He provided the image bearers with exactly what they had asked for. And now it was time for the full frontal attack. The gods of jealousy and envy immediately went to work, twisting and turning the new king's mind. Shortly followed was the gods of war and sex in a 1-2 punch. One beautiful woman on the right roof at the right time, followed by an act of violence and murder. And as the war picked up speed, several gods got in on the action at the same time, attacking from multiple fronts, causing the image bearers to fear for their safety and comforts. And the god of sex came in with a solution: just intermarry, and you'll get peace from war, you'll get peace from destruction. Just mingle the blood. And with the act, invited in were a flood of new gods that came with their own demands. You need a baby? Sacrifice right over here. You need your crops to grow? That's going to cost you. You want to hear from the dead? Come see our mediums and our psychics. Come let us call on them for you. You need the rain to stop? Step right up. We've got you covered. One by one, the rebel gods attacked and retreated. They attacked and they retreated. They lost some battles and they won some battles. And so the war went. One attack followed by a counter, one after the other, after the other, after the other. The image bearers would ask the rebel gods for answers. So the Creator would send prophets. The Creator would set up safeguards and protections, and the rebels would find a workaround. And with each attack, the rebel gods had one goal in mind: destroy the Creator by destroying His beloved. Deface the masterpiece. Demote the crown of creation to being nothing more but pawns in the ultimate Game of Thrones. Defile the image bearers until they were nothing more than dirty whores on the side of the street. Defeat the Creator by destroying His beloved. And so the war went. Battle after battle, betrayal after betrayal, until one day the Creator stopped countering and He went silent. The battle of the unseen appeared to be over. But in their celebration, the rebels missed it. The most important thing that they needed to see. They missed the blinking warning light on the wall in their battle room of impending danger. Now, the story we heard this morning, it may make it easy to feel like or to believe that we're just pawns in some big story and we really don't have any control, that we really don't have any decisions to make. And I want to encourage you, don't fall for that lie. Don't fall for the lie that what the gods do, and I know that that statement alone makes it uncomfortable for some of us. That's why we're walking through it this way. But don't fall for the lie that what they do, we have no power over. Because as we're going to discover as we go into part 2 next week and part 3 the next week, that we actually are given a lot of power. That we have the power to decide which gods we will follow, whether or not we will follow the Creator or whether or not we will follow the rebel gods. But this week, what I want to invite you to do is to daily choose who you will worship. Who will be the one that you will follow? And to ask yourself the question this week, how have you How have we intermarried? How have we mixed the bloodlines between our faith and the culture that is around us? And what has been the result of that in our lives? This is not just a game where we are a bunch of pawns with no power. This is a game where God has, not a game, this is a war where God has given us weapons to fight back with. But we must choose which side we're on, and we must choose which weapons we will use. I hope that you're able to come back for part 2 next week, because I'm going to tell you right now, part 2 is even more exciting than part 1. So I hope to see you next week.